It's on.
In this past week, spending time with family and friends in Los Angeles, I came to a conclusion. It is not going to be easy to deal with consumerism. After spending time talking with my friends and my family from my hometown about everything we've been learning in this class, trying to explain how we as a country and a planet, but more so the United States, need to use far less resources in order to have a future for Earth, well, I was met with anger, fear, denial, and rejection. I guess it is true when Jesus said that a prophet is never accepted in his hometown. At least they didn't try and push me off a cliff or stone me like they tried to do to him. But, when I think back on the conversations that I had, I think that maybe some of it had to do with my own arrogance and pride. And so it made it difficult for them to listen to me. And maybe I didn't really take the time to listen to them. Yet I didn't want to back down on what I felt was so important for them to know. That there is too much individualism / modern mind industrial complex in our brains. And this is leading to infinite consumerism, the destruction of our planet, objectifying it, and the people we live with, especially those who are different from the white majority. And how through this objectification we have created a new way to oppress difference. They need to know about the new Jim Crow and about the destruction of the environment and the consequences of our infinite greed. But maybe all of my high and mighty talk was coming from too much pride. Maybe I need to take myself down a notch and remember what God says to us through the gospel story that Lutherans love to tell. There seems to be a connection between what we're learning about in this class and my experience this summer working as an intern chaplain in Los Angeles County Hospital. It was there that I learned a lot about the gospel story, about finding hope in the midst of calamity. There were many people in the hospital where I was that showed symptoms of the consumerist lifestyle and evils of the systems and principalities and powers which dominate our world, including racism, classism, nationalism, sexism, and more, and all that I have come to know so well since arriving here at the GTU. I see a connection here between one emphasis of this preaching class, which is moving from a constant growth paradigm to one of sustainability in our environment. A lot of the patients I visited this summer were there because of issues related to socioeconomic status and the consumerist lifestyle of our country. I estimate that about 1/3, I'm not completely sure, but about 1/3 of the people that I met in the hospital were there because of random accidents, getting in a car accident or getting hit on their bike or falling and breaking a leg. And about 2/3 of the other cases were from cases that could have been resolved with proper nutrition, education, and a change of lifestyle. I find it fascinating that this idea of unsatisfied consumption that we're learning about in this class is not something new. So I wanted to talk about, going back in time a little bit, the 7 deadly sins of the Orthodox Church. But I'm just going to mention the first and the last because many people say that these two encapsulate all of them. So the first sin is gluttony. Now, most people think that gluttony is just overeating. But this sin is actually pointing to a gluttony of the heart. This means that when we try to fulfill our desire to know God, which I'm defining as oneness with all things, when we try to fulfill this desire to know God, by consuming things, it leads to dissatisfaction, because the more we consume, the more we need to consume. It will never give us fulfillment, and in fact, it only makes us desire to consume more. And the last of the 7 deadly sins is pride. So on the one hand, people are stuck looking for life and happiness in the consumption of things, And on the other hand, those who recognize the sin of consumption and try to change their lives often fall into the trap of becoming prideful of their awareness, which is something that I noticed in myself last week. So we must always keep watch that in turning from one sin, we might run into another. So for instance, I've been learning so much here at the GTU and in this class about the many problems facing our country and the whole planet. And I've been working to create change in myself and in my community, to turn away from the sin of consumerism. But if because I'm aware and changing and working for positive change in the world, I become prideful of this grace in my life and of this knowledge, it will actually fight against what I'm trying to do. So I think back on my time with friends and family, and perhaps the method I used to share this knowledge was not helpful for the people I desperately wanted to reach. But on the other hand, we often know that the information we are providing is difficult for many to accept. It's not something that people really want to believe. I think there's so much in my own Lutheran tradition that is apt for the spreading of this awareness, that we need to make big changes in our habits as people. See, Lutherans emphasize being right with God through the faith we have in God's promises to the world. We cannot be right with God in any other way than to realize that this is true, because God has promised us and assured us of God's love. And we know that consuming things is not going to alter this status. Therefore, the need to consume should lose its value. But then why is it so difficult to convince people that are from my own background? Then I want to go back to the Orthodox tradition I was talking about, because I think there's some merit in that tradition that can help us in this matter. In Orthodox spirituality, people are considered to be trapped in the passions of the world. Apparently, humans have a deep need for God, which we've spoken of, but we are blinded in trying to fulfill that need through consuming things. And the more we try to control the things of the world, the more we think that we are the center of the universe, and the less we are in commune with the infinite oneness of that universe. And one part I find really critical here is that these passions of the human person to consume lead to ignorance. So even though it seems so irrational not to accept the fact that we need to stop consuming the resources of the planet, people will find excuses and rationalizations to continue living this lifestyle. Now, an Orthodox Christianity itself bases many of its propositions on what we would call a dualism of the body and spirit. So in this tradition, the spirit is trapped in the corporeal flesh. The world is not completely evil, but it's pretty much going in that direction. And the soul of the person may continue on after this life, but the physical body must be left behind to decay. And I've seen that this dualism is very difficult to stomach for a lot of people in this day and age, especially here at the GTU. To say that the physical is evil or prone to evil seems to be the cause for a lot of the problems facing our world today. Because we have emphasized the individual relationship with God so much, people can justify abuse and oppression now on the grounds that the oppressed will have a better existence after this life. Martyr's blood is known as the seed of the Christian church, for instance. And so for many, this makes the spiritual and physical realms separate from each other. One is holy and the other is mundane. In the time of the Old and New Testaments, when they said spirit, that word was actually synonymous with air, and the flesh with the dust of the ground, the earth itself. So while the spirit, that is air, can go where it wants and is invisible to the eye, the earth is what is trampled underfoot, what gets things dirty. Yeah, it's where we grow food, but we only need the food because we are part of the earth. So the earth is mundane in comparison to the air or spirit flowing through the cosmos. At least that is what their view of the universe was like. So within this worldview, the air is still a physical thing. It's not corporeal in the same sense as a rock or a human being, but it has physical qualities, which is much different from the common Christian understanding of spirit in the United States and elsewhere, which says that it is completely non-physical. Yet our understanding of spirit today, and our worldview in general, is vastly different from the ancient scholars. Spirit to us is not just the air. Spirit makes up everything in existence. Spirit is the energy of the cosmos, which is what makes us all a part of the same whole, bringing us to oneness with all of creation. This means that Earth and everything in the planet and all the universe is comprised of the same energy and same spirit, though this is in a way hidden because pure energy that makes up the universe cannot be seen or touched. Or maybe it can. In this view, also it would be incorrect to say that the spirit is not physical. But what if we could see that the spirit is really a part of the physical world and not apart from it? We all know that people die. The dispute is about what happens then. From the Orthodox position, we do find the spirit through the world, but only when we are able to control the world. The spirit is altogether better than the rest of the physical world, and it is found only when we are not controlled by the passions of existence. What if we could see that through the senses, through touch and sight, through feeling, we could really see and feel the spirit as an intimate and inseparable part of our existence? One of the patients I met this summer at the hospital in particular helped me to see this connection. I got referred to go to this patient's room on one Saturday when I was mainly working in the ER, where she was supposed to go in for surgery that day. It was a major surgery. And so she needed someone to be with her to help her calm down, someone just to sit with her and be a presence for her. It felt like I was there for about 30 minutes, but when I left the room, I noticed 2 hours had passed. See, technically they tell hospital chaplains to separate our time into 15-minute chunks, so we could see about 2 to 4 patients each hour. But working as a chaplain, one really has to know when to decipher where time should be spent. I didn't even need to know consciously that this person needed more time. I just felt it, and there was really nothing else I could do. We talked and talked. She told me her story, how they found a tumor, and all of the other issues that she had. And her husband was suffering from similar things. He had cancer, and that's why he couldn't be there most of the time to support her, because he only had a few good days a week. At one point, I remember reaching out and clasping her hands in mine as she cried and told me how lonely she was and how she was afraid. We held hands and sat in that pain for a long time. During part of the stay, I asked her about what kind of diet her husband and her ate. She said that her husband loved to eat sweet things, sweetbreads, candies, pies, cakes, and all of that. And the doctors had suggested they both stop eating those things because they said it was leading to the cause of the cancer and most likely her illness. But she said her husband just loved them and couldn't stop eating them. And because he did it, she couldn't stop either. Then she told me that her children, she didn't believe her children really wanted to spend time with her. She suspected that they didn't love her anymore. It was so difficult for me to find hope in this situation with everything she was telling me. And this was no different from many of the people I met in that hospital. In fact, I spent most of my time working in pediatrics. And I can tell you, finding hope in the midst of the death or serious injury of a child is nigh impossible, in my opinion. The hope I found did not come from me in the least. The hope sprung from the people I talked to. When they told me their story, when I shared my empathy, I began to see that the hope was already there in the person talking to me. They had the power to change their lives through the grace of God, to continue forward into a new life. They had everything there with them. All we both needed was the relationship and the empathy that traveled between us. And that was enough to continue on for one more day or one more week. That was enough to find some form of healing, to be able to look toward the future, to ask God what the hell He was thinking. There was a lot of anger involved. But they needed an opportunity to express that emotion of anger and despair or whatever it was. And then they needed support to see where they could go from there. I wasn't the only one providing the support, except perhaps in the case of the lady I spoke to. Where I mentioned where I spent 2 hours that she didn't have anybody to come be with her. For many of those patients and their families, I was maybe a blip on the map. But I do believe that my presence there did have an effect in their lives. And they certainly altered my life for the better. So what we've been learning, all this that we've been learning in this class about sustainability, and in the sermon you gave, Matthew, about the local garden working in Berkeley, I think all of that is exactly the kinds of things that these people in our hospitals specifically could use to help change their lives around, to live healthier, and to build up our communities. And I think the church, I'm thinking of my church here, the Lutheran Church, could be doing so much more to work for this goal. It could be doing so much. I'm thinking about all the extra space used by so many churches to maintain lush grass that barely gets used by anyone, where they could be growing crops, building community, and helping people survive and eat healthily at the same time. My work in the hospital this summer taught me so much about what it means to be with people in their need. For that presence we can be for each other. And I think the church needs to continue to visit and build community with neighboring institutions such as hospitals, prisons, schools, and more. But we can also be actively working at both ends to support people in difficult situations and to help make sure that future generations can work together and change and grow and build just and fruitful relationships with each other and with our planet. The church, at least my own church, has often been quite good at building hospitals, assisted living homes, and working in some education. We've been pretty good at visiting our members in the hospital about chaplaincy work and so forth. It seems that we have been doing well at helping to stem the symptoms of the issues facing humans in our consumption, but we have not been so great in our work to bring solutions to the root of the problem, which is so strange to me because I think the gospel we profess to proclaim can be a cure for many of these issues. After my time at the hospital, I know that I want to have a volunteer group that visits the local hospital by the church I'm serving, and hopefully if there's a prison nearby, not that it would be good for there to be a prison, but we can work in the prison if there is one, the assisted living homes in the area. I know this, that I want to start this program because of the way that my life was changed through working in that hospital. It's not just for the benefit of the patients. I was changed dramatically, and I want my fellow churchgoers to have that same experience of transformation, of finding the Spirit with the sick and the poor in our institutions, those who have been oppressed and abused by our systems. Finding God in that situation is, I believe, one of the main points of the story of Jesus and the crucifixion. Finding God and empowerment when all hope seems lost. Yet at the same time, we have to be actively working toward changing those things and not just putting a band-aid on the wounds. Because I believe we are healed of our wounds and grow in our faith so that we can lessen the destruction to others in our world because of the empathy we share. I think this class has helped me to realize how much we need to change our practice as a church, the Lutheran Church. How the message of the gospel looks so outdated to people coming from my own background because we're not in the midst of the issues facing us now. As a church, we need to tackle the issue of consumerism head on. The idea of infinite growth needs to be combated with an image of the Spirit in the finite. Even what some would consider unholy world, where death and destruction are everyday constants in the lives of people, yet the spirit of love is found in the midst of these situations. It was so frustrating when I was talking to friends and family this last week, and they wouldn't agree with me or listen to my advice when I know it's something we all need to know. It's also frustrating to see patients in the hospital caught in a system where the doctors are not often aware of the holistic needs of the patients, from radical changes in diet to their psychological and especially their spiritual needs. It was really a simple thing that I did to sit with that patient for 2 hours, to listen to her story, to share my compassion for her, to encourage her, to change her life, to work towards a better living situation for her and her husband, and to work towards a better relationship with her family. But at the same time, it is a very difficult thing to do. A part of me was screaming to stop holding her hands. It's out of my comfort zone. To leave that room as soon as I could. A part of me doesn't want to give up my own consumerist lifestyle either. It is definitely not going to be easy to make all of this change happen, as I saw in this past week in a short time. All of my ideals and all of my knowledge that I thought would change people immediately didn't make the cut. But maybe I need to go back to that image of the wounded patient, afraid, despairing, perhaps reflecting my own fear and despair. Yet through the human touch and contact we shared, I know that she gained something from my presence. And I know that I learned so much from that experience and the many more I had in the hospital. Not because each of us individually gained something from the relationship, but it is through the relationship, the human interaction, that hope is born. And therefore our work cannot be futile because we build our communities always in relationship with all of creation and God. And through this relationship, we recognize the connection found in the oneness of the Spirit that is the energy sustaining us all. And through this knowledge, we can work together to turn the consciousness of the human species on this planet to one of sustainability with each other and the rest of our environment. May the grace and peace of the Spirit sustain us all. Amen.
Thank you.